It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer Kent. NPR has learned that the White House is delaying and may cancel roughly $140 million in federal grants to fund opioid overdose response efforts. Here in Wisconsin, a spokesperson for the state health department says the state has not received word about the status of these federal funds. Wisconsin was set to receive nearly $4.5 million this year. To learn what's at stake, we have Sarah Jesse, Community Health Manager for Sauk County. Sarah, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Peter Brunzell is here, Executive Director of WIS Hope. That's a nonprofit peer-run recovery community organization with peer recovery coaches. Peter, welcome.
Thank you.
Sarah, let's start with you. Your county has received nearly $150,000 a year in funds from the CDC's program called Overdose Data to Action. How is Sauk County using these funds?
Yes, thank you, Kate. Public Health Sauk County has been receiving this overdose data to action funding since 2019. And currently we have two grant projects that together provide us with about $150,000 annually. And we use this money to save lives from overdose and improve well-being for people in recovery in our county. One of our OD2A grants helps fund our contract with Project WIS Hope, which we're going to hear a lot about today. We hope in just a moment. They provide us with peer recovery coach services. And just a short description, a peer recovery coach is someone who's in recovery themselves and is trained to help others who are working to overcome their addiction. They give support, encouragement, and help people stay on track with their goals for a healthier, drug-free life. So peer coaches aren't doctors or therapists. They focus on everyday support and understand what it's like because they've been there too. I'm really excited for us to talk more about all the great work our recovery coaches are doing in Sauk County. But first, I'd like to give a brief overview of our second OD2A grant project. This one funds the Sauk County Overdose Death Review Team, which is an interdisciplinary team representing over 25 local agencies that meets to confidentially review overdose fatalities in our area. This team gathers information from community partners, and when possible, we interview the decedent's next of kin to listen to their loved one's story. From this, we identify risk factors and points of prevention, and then recommend changes in our systems, policies, and programs to prevent future deaths.
So that data, the data is super important. And from what I understand,
Yes.
Overdoses, whether they be fatal or non-fatal, they are difficult to track. Why is that? Why is the data sometimes difficult?
Well, it can be very difficult depending on whether there is a bystander for the overdose that calls 911 or brings that individual to emergency services. We do work very closely here at Public Health Sauk County with our EMS agencies. We have an EMS peer support rapid response program that goes out and tries to connect people who survive a non-fatal overdose to services. And we also gather the data from our EMS providers then on non-fatal and fatal overdose.
Peter, turning to you, you're working on these recovery, peer-run recovery coaches and have that effort in Sauk County, among other counties. Why is this piece so important?
It Having somebody with lived experience approaching someone else that's struggling is usually a very effective way of gaining trust and being able to help them see that there is a path forward. So I think that sometimes that's missed if it's too clinical or too medical.
Mm. You have been working on the peer recovery coach piece for years now. What differences can you see? What impact is it having?
Well, I can
It brings
speak
that
to, go ahead,
so,
Peter.
well, it brings that sense of community a lot quicker. There's when you have people that are next to you that are in recovery and pulling and prodding a little bit, usually you have a lot more response from the community at large. And you keep doing that year after year, and you start to have a little bit of a coalition happening of people really working together in their community for recovery.
Have you seen Wishope grow over the years?
Yep, we've
Yeah.
grown quite substantially. Yep.
Sarah, what will happen? I mean, you are concerned that about this federal funds. You are set to receive these funds at the beginning of September. What is causing you concern now?
Well, I can tell you, Kate, that in part due to overdose data to action funding, Sauk County has successfully reduced our rate of overdose deaths, which used to be among the highest in the state. We went from 17 accidental overdose deaths in 2020 to just 7 in 2023, and we've had less than 5 so far in 2025. These numbers might not sound high to our listeners, but we're a rural community, so it does represent a higher than typical rate for our state. So if we lose this funding, our programming is in jeopardy. We would need to reduce the hours of our peer recovery coaches by 1/3. So this might mean that we have to prioritize individuals that receive help, or that people have to wait longer to talk to a recovery coach. And we know so often people who need these services have a really brief window when they're ready to move on an opportunity like meeting with a coach. So this would be a terrible blow to Sauk County to lose this funding.
We're learning about concerns over the potential cancellation of federally funded grants that go toward opioid overdose response efforts. Sarah Jesse is here, Community Health Manager for Sauk County, and Peter Brunzell is Executive Director of Wishope. Peter, are you concerned about the future of Wishope if we see the federal overdose data to action program grants are actually being canceled?
I don't think I would say concerned about Wiz Hope, the future of it. I think that there's there's different programs like this that if funding's cut, you have to find the other alternate ways of funding it. But programs like this are obviously saving lives. So at the end of the day, that's what we look at and continue to try to bring that to our community as a whole.
Have you found concerns in other counties beyond Sauk?
Yes, funding has been up and down throughout the other counties as well. So it's a consistent tone throughout all funding sources right now. Yes.
Sarah, can you talk further about the importance of data, having current and even real time data to stop overdose deaths? And even in the name overdose data to action, and your overdose death review team in Sauk County, why is that piece so important?
Well, Kate, real time data provides us with trends on what's in our drug supply. These days, when you buy, for example, a counterfeit pill on the street, you have no idea what's in that. It could be the deadly substance fentanyl that doesn't taste or smell or look like anything that you could distinguish. So we track this data so that we know if a bad batch is in our area, and we can alert our partners to that so that people who use drugs and their loved ones can be more careful, have Narcan on hand, for example, never use alone, and take other precautions to save lives.
Sarah,
And
what trends has your team found about opioid deaths in Sauk County? What have you picked up on?
well, since 2020, most of our overdose deaths involve both an opioid, usually fentanyl, and a stimulant like cocaine or methamphetamine. So that is the deadly combination that we're seeing in our area. And I think that is true for our state and most of our nation as well.
I want to also take a look. Wisconsin is set to receive more than $780 million in the opioid settlement funds through 2038. Peter, you first. What does that money mean in this moment of uncertainty around federal grants?
I think that there's a lot of uses for those funds and how the state chooses how to identify where to go with them. It can definitely move programs like this forward and continue them for many years to come, depending on how they funnel that money and where it goes.
Yeah. How critical is harm reduction services in order to stop overdose deaths?
It's very critical. hmm Being able to have the supplies and that consistency uh, changes that response and community awareness as a whole.
Sarah, what are your insights on this other piece of funding that's coming in and how Sauk County would be using its portion of opioid settlement funds?
Well, Sauk County is very fortunate to have some opioid settlement dollars available. We've been cautious about using them in this funding environment where we typically are using federal and state dollars for our kind of everyday programming. We now have to think about using the opioid settlement dollars for that program, to maintain those programs, instead of perhaps branching into other types of support that are needed. We've identified, for example, that we really need sober living here in Sauk County and are planning to use those opioid settlement dollars for that purpose. But we're cautious right now because without these federal and state dollars that we receive, we won't be able to continue to save lives as we've been doing now for decades.
Well, Sarah and Peter, thank you so much. Appreciate your time checking in on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Jesse is Community Health Manager for Sauk County. Peter Brunzel, Executive Director of WIS Hope. That's a peer-run recovery group providing peer recovery coaches. We talked about potential grant disruptions that could hurt federally funded efforts in Wisconsin communities to stop opioid overdose deaths. If you or think someone is struggling with addiction, for help, call the free and confidential treatment referral hotline at 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-HELP, or visit findtreatment.gov. Coming up, craft brewers in Wisconsin face new challenges. Some have closed. Hear from two industry leaders about the ripple effects when business is up and down.
It really does have a big impact on your local economy, and that's one of the great things about craft beer is we really are economic drivers for our communities.
That's next from WPR News. It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. For the first time in 20 years, more craft breweries closed across the nation than opened. That's according to the Brewers Association Industry Report of 2024 data. And that's the case here in Wisconsin, too. The state's craft breweries declined by about 1.5% last year. This comes with a mix of challenges. One is changing tastes. Craft brews are competing against THC-infused beverages, hard seltzers, and ready-to-drink cocktails, among other drinks. And then there are the economic hurdles. The White House has expanded tariffs on aluminum and steel, are rattling supply chains. Aluminum tariffs hit brewers particularly hard due to the reliance on aluminum cans to package most beer. In this volatility, we're checking in with leaders of two Wisconsin's craft breweries. First up is Deb Carey, founder and CEO of New Glarus Brewing Company. Deb, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Oh, Kate, thanks so much for having me on.
We have been seeing some craft breweries closing, going dark. Is this industry contraction that we're seeing in these numbers, is it worrisome?
Well, I guess it depends on the position that you're in. Generally, when things occur like this in my world, I look at it as an opportunity and a challenge. You really, in order to get anywhere in almost any business these days, customers are so sophisticated that the table stakes are beyond anybody's imagining from 10 or 20 years ago. You can't just throw a shingle out and do the kind of I've built it so they'll come anymore. And so it does make it a challenge for a lot of people, but um, this has happened a number of times in the 30 plus years that we've had New Glarus Brewing Company going, and I'm sure it'll happen again.
You've seen a lot of cycles over the decades. The state, of course, has a long brewing history. Are there particular challenges at this moment that craft breweries are facing in Wisconsin?
Well, I think the biggest one that no one really has any control over is the economic uncertainty, because when people are anxious, whatever the situation is, if it's looking at floods or politics, it makes everybody a little apprehensive about spending or celebrating, and they're more careful with their income.
New Glarus, the largest craft brewery in Wisconsin, one of the largest in the nation, and you have this multi-million-dollar expansion underway. Will that expansion change your approach to only selling in Wisconsin or making you think differently about state borders?
No, I am one of the most bullheaded people on the planet, and our I know it's you just have to own it at a certain point. And the business model that I'm functioning under is to make world class beer for our friends in Wisconsin and really focus on taking care of our home territory. And to a lot of people, that sounds counterintuitive because, of course, bigger is always better, right? But I argue that point vehemently because in the history of breweries, as you say, this has happened before, and often brewers, and I hate to just say it's a guy thing, but I might. Um, they get a little bit competitive and egotistical about I'm going to be the biggest or I'm going to be nationwide, and I being the biggest or nationwide really doesn't pay the bills or provide employee benefits. My responsibility is as much as I do not care about numbers or money, my responsibility is to take care of the financial health of the business, its investors and employees. So what I'm doing makes us profitable, and I'm going to stay on this track.
Can you give us an update? You broke ground on a $55 million expansion last year. It's underway. Can you talk a little bit about the expansion and what's happening?
Yeah, sure. It's super exciting. It was designed by our resident architect, Catherine May. She's a young woman, and she is, I have to say here, she's also our daughter. And being a female licensed architect in the state of Wisconsin is kind of a rare thing, and she's done a number of really big projects for us, but this one is by far the biggest. We are doubling the size of the brew hall, so instead of just 4 copper vessels, there will be 8, and they've already been set in place. Then anybody who's visited our brewery knows that it has this beautiful location on the top of a hill. And Dan and I are kind of romantics, and that's what you do in Europe. And we love our little town of New Glarus, but we never imagined being as popular as we are. And so the parking became downright dangerous, and it was too fragmented, and people get pushy sometimes about where they want to park, and everybody shows up with their vacation brain on. So anyway, thankfully, we never had anything serious happen, but it caused me so much anxiety that between needing more production space and we want to have a place where people can see a little more demonstration brewing and get our distillery back, in the fold. We or Catherine designed the building so it goes down the hill. So when people come in the future, they'll be able to park in the big field that used to be the overflow parking and just walk into the building and take an elevator up the hill. And I think this will be a lot more comfortable for everybody.
Well, some of those things, we've dealt with COVID. inflation.
Yeah.
You've dealt with competition pressures from like hard seltzers and other new beverages and grocery shelf space, and now President Trump's tariffs. What might the tariff situation do to the industry? What are your thoughts there?
Well, it is, such an unavoidable challenge, and I don't think that anybody can dismiss the whether or not the tariff is specifically targeting a certain business or industry. You can't underestimate the effect it has on the economy. And um, I have friends who think this is great and it's moving forward, and we'll all see in a few years how that pans out. And I pray every day that they are right. However, this fact of the matter is, at this point, it does create economic pressure on pricing, and really is harming a lot of breweries. Fortunately for us, being bullheaded and loving Wisconsin, our bottles and cans and packaging have been coming from Wisconsin for a lot of years.
Mm.
We're the biggest user of Wisconsin hops. We buy barley from all over the world, and some in Europe and Germany, and hops from many places in Europe. And so it does affect us, but not to the extent that it affects others.
I looked it up. You've packaged Spotted Cow in cans for nearly a decade now. And so I would imagine, though,
Wow.
I'd imagine you'd need a strong supply chain in place to weather the fluctuations and things you don't know and the changing conditions in packaging.
Yeah, it's true. It's not just the raw materials. Those are super important, but also it takes a village to make a beer is at absolute truth. Our wholesalers are the ones who bring it to the market. Retailers, tavern owners, they're the people who are serving the beer. There's an army of people making the beer, and there's all kinds of little side industries like our insurance company and the bankers. And um, sometimes I think people forget that when businesses struggle or flourish, it really does have a big impact on your local economy. And that's one of the great things about craft beer is we really are economic drivers for our communities.
You mentioned the finicky situation of consumers and different influences there, economic, that could affect whether they go and have some beer. Are there generational changes you're seeing with craft brewing? Between like how Gen X and millennials may want it versus what you see coming out of Gen Z?
Well, I am so old that, frankly, when you say all these letters, I'm like, which one? Which one is that? But what I can tell you is that people are very sophisticated, and they also have strong opinions on what they like to eat and drink. And this really works for craft brewers because years ago when we started, there was, beer was like Wonder Bread. It was kind of homogenous and not very interesting. And then as craft brewers grew, consumers became more curious and started to investigate different flavors. And I used to notice, and I found it quite humorous, that women were really far more curious about flavor than men were. If there was a big burly guy that could lift tree trunks in the brewery, I could almost bet that they would ask for something light. And if there were a little tiny older woman and she had on her glasses and looking like she's headed to somebody's house, she would be the first one to say, do you have something dark, do you have something different? And they want to taste different things. And so I think as the years have gone by, people have become used to the idea of beer having lots of flavors and not just a homogeneous, bland beverage. And that just really works for craft brewers. And I think it works for our society too. Beer gets kind of a bad rap, But in fact, it is the beverage of moderation. And it also brings together people in a healthy community connection kind of way, whether it's at a picnic or your local restaurant or tavern. Having social connections, particularly after COVID, it's a rich experience and one that we shouldn't shy away from. And certainly, if you're going to be having any alcohol at all, you should be looking for something that is moderate in its alcohol content.
Deb, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kate. It's always a pleasure.
We've been talking about the economic conditions in the craft brewing industry with Deb Carey, founder and CEO of New Glarus Brewing Company. Now to the Fox Valley, where the Fox River Brewing Company in Oshkosh turns 30 this year. CEO Jay Supley and his family are always on the move, making deliveries for the brewery around the state, and business is brisk. We're catching up with Jay, calling on clients in Green Bay.
Business is great, and for me, it's not so much deliveries. It's meeting with a lot of our clients that we have there. We work really closely with 1919 at Lambeau Field and several of the other ones just outside between Stadium View, the bar, and Doozy, D2, pretty much anybody that's out there. We obviously always try to make a call on them as well.
And when you say business is great, you're getting lots of calls for deliveries. Places are stocking up. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it's always a good time. Summertime is always a good time for us, and I think for a lot of breweries and stuff like that on the craft side, especially with a lot of outside activities. And then, Green Bay is always busy this time of year. Training camp starts tomorrow, and so it's always a great time around Green Bay. This time, it's always exciting with the Packers starting training camp, and so this has always been busy. But I will say, around Lambeau Field, it's busy year round. I was here last week in Green Bay, and it was busy around Lambeau Field as well as the bars and restaurants around there too and stuff like that. There's always stuff going on there with the Rest Center, the Shopko Center. So there's a lot of activities that are happening there. So it's always a good spot for us.
It seems like your business isn't showing signs of softening, but there are these, notable financial issues on the horizon for craft brewing. The steel and aluminum tariffs, the imported raw ingredients like barley and malt at risk for growing tariffs. How do you feel about those risks?
There's risk, but honestly, there's risk in anything we do. It doesn't matter. 'Cause obviously, we have restaurants besides breweries and stuff like that. So, we deal with rising costs on produce, chicken, steak, and everything. Everything that we do in business. I think a lot of it is just managing the costs. I mean, I think managing inventories is important. Managing labor is important. So I think there's a lot of things to do with that. And also, it's the biggest thing, Kate, is increasing volume, increasing awareness. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing you have to do. Sometimes a lot of your costs can be offset with volume, and it's really critical that you try to increase your volumes, because as you increase volume, obviously it's more cash flow, which helps minimize the risk as well as helps minimize the cost of doing business and stuff like that. So it's a reverse. If you're having declining sales with rising costs, that's not a good thing. So in our case, we try to increase sales to minimize the percentages.
Do you find that over the course of different generations, whether you're Gen Z and just emerging, whether you're Gen X, are there different tastes that your customers have?
Yeah, there is, but what I do find interesting now with you talk about the Gen Zs and stuff like that is they're looking for, lower alcohol. They're looking, obviously, to not have that, high alcohol experience. They're looking at NA beverages and things like that as well. And that's where mocktails come in. We do a lot with mocktails. We have NA beer as well. But then it's interesting is you look at, say, 65 in retirement. As you retire the 70, 75, that has become a very active with pickleball and walking and stuff, biking and stuff like that. They're kind of also stepping back a little bit, and they're actually looking for something a little bit more on the lower ABV. So it's kind of interesting if you look at one spectrum, 21, you look at another spectrum at 65. There's definitely some likeness between what they're looking for from both categories, from both sides and stuff like that.
You definitely have to have your pulse on what your customers are telling you. In terms of also diversifying your business, I'm wondering if there are any lessons learned from the pandemic times. I mean, that was a really rough time for the craft brewing industry. Are there takeaways from that experience that you have in play today?
Well, it was interesting from that when COVID hit. What was really interesting is obviously on-premise stopped for a while. Like we shut down for over 70 days. I think that's where we were shut down. But if you look at that from the time it took to get back, really where we're at today, a lot of it went to off-premise packaging. So we definitely seen a large increase in that side of it. So there was a lot of opportunities for gaining SKUs and stuff like that, because obviously the guest was shopping in grocery stores and Quick Trips and places like that and stuff. So there definitely was a change in that, which is good to a point, because there was a lot of visibility in the brand. We were able to get out there in a lot more places that we probably weren't, at in other places, other parts of the state and in the UP and stuff like that, And then what happened is slowly as it came back, the restaurant business itself came back to brewery inside dining rooms. They picked up. There was that visibility of us being out there, that they've seen our product and stuff like that too. So it was kind of interesting from that perspective.
Jay, good to talk with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Jay Supley is CEO of Fox River Brewing Company in Oshkosh and Appleton. We've been talking about how Wisconsin's craft brewing industry is dealing with economic uncertainty. And earlier, we got a read on the industry from New Glarus Brewing Company founder and CEO Deb Carey. Still ahead, a presenter at the Wisconsin Insect Fest talks about the wild lives of wetland insects.
One of them has an abdomen that's shaped like a can opener. And so the female will literally go up to the hornet, pry open its abdomen, and shoot an egg in there.
Insects surviving and thriving in Wisconsin marshlands. That's next on WPR News. You're listening to Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Now it's time for Wisconsin Life. Here's producer Maureen McCullum with a story about staying connected with a loved one who has passed.
Have you ever picked up a hobby because a friend or a relative was really into it? Try to see if they're truly onto something? Writer Yia Laura Vauclair did this with geocaching, an outdoor activity her late sister, Gerlor, loved to do with her kids.
My sister Zhao was an epic geocacher. She wasn't afraid of getting lost in fields, climbing through brush, or being greeted by spiders. Well, maybe she was a little, but she still went. Geocaching is an outdoor treasure hunting activity where hiders and seekers come to play. Seekers, like my sister, use GPS-enabled devices to locate hidden containers called geocaches that include a logbook and sometimes trinkets to swap. In the Eau Claire area alone, there are almost 900 hidden treasures. I've added geocaching to my list of things to do when I miss my sister. This was one of her favorite hobbies with the kids in her life, and though she'd asked me to tag along, I never did. There was something about needing to go off trail at times, or searching aimlessly while strangers walked by that made me feel uneasy. My sister wasn't shy though. She was all about finding the treasure. One afternoon, my nieces asked if we could go to the park. We hadn't ventured out much since my sister died, and this seemed like an easy enough feat to accomplish. When we arrived, one of my nieces said, "There's a geocache here." Before I knew it, she was holding a canister that somehow magically appeared from the pines. The kids dug through for which trinket they wanted to keep, while I scanned the logbook. Then, my eyes landed on my sister's name. Zhao. I glanced up at the towering pines, maples, and oaks. They likely greeted my sister too when she was here. I took a picture of her signature to create a stamp so she could go into every logbook I found from then on. The first time I went geocaching by myself was after it had rained. The ground was muddy and mosquitoes were out in full force. I was not prepared in my shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops, but I was missing my sister and felt the urge to go. The geocaching app showed several treasures along the trails in my neighborhood. After parking, I navigated to the closest geocache, but struggled to find it amongst the fallen branches. After the 10th mosquito bite, I moved along to the trails. As I got closer to the next geocache, I realized that it was hidden off-trail. There I stood, staring into the woods, swatting at the buzzing by my ear, and debating with my sister. "You want me to go in there?" I said. "There's not even a way in." Just like Zhao would have done, though, I paved my own path. I moved branches out of my way and crawled alongside a moss-covered log in search of a geocache called the Naughty Potty Gnome. My sister would have loved that. After almost losing one of my flip-flops twice and my hair full of webs, I reached the end of the fallen log, where I was greeted by a gnome sitting on a toilet. On the bottom of the sculpture, I unscrewed a tube to find the logbook and stamped my sister's name. Together, we had found our first treasure. It didn't surprise me when Zhao took the old pill bottles from my recycling bin and turned them into geocaches. She delivered them one day, suggesting I hide them. Instead, I put them inside a cupboard and forgot. After she passed away, I found them while cleaning. Zhao had created over 20 geocaches filled with logbooks and trinkets. I opened each one, stamped her name into the logbook, and thought of all the places my sister and I could hide them.
Writer Yia Laura Vauclair brought us that story on her sister and geocaching. Wisconsin Life is a co-production of Wisconsin Public Radio and PBS Wisconsin. Additional support comes from Lowell and Mary Peterson of Appleton. Find more Wisconsin Life at wisconsinlife.org and on Facebook and Instagram. I'm Maureen McCullum.
It's Wisconsin Today. Just observing a Wisconsin wetland with your binoculars in hand, it might be hard to tell how the insects that live there lead a very complicated life in their ecosystem. A UW-Madison graduate student has spent a lot of time in these special places that provide a rich habitat for wildlife, and she has a growing body of evidence of insect interactions. Anne Marsh has been studying wetland insects for over 2 decades. She categorized insects that show parental love by burying dead rodents and flies that inject eggs into their prey's stomachs. She studies a group called staphylinids, which are composting bugs. Her talk at the upcoming Wisconsin Insect Fest is titled Sex, Violence, and Deception, The Hidden World of Wetland Insects. Anne, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Why do wetland insects deserve such a rollicking and hell-raising description in the title of your presentation?
So insects have evolved to be in very specific niches in ecology. And these particular insects have evolved to be in acidic wetland areas. And so you won't typically find them in too many places.
Can you talk more about this family of beetles and what their days are like?
So this particular family of beetles is huge. It has over 66,000 species. So I actually study 2 subfamilies. And so that consists of taking that 66,000 group family and taking it down to 94.
Oh, that's more manageable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so these particular insects are found in the wetlands, and they feed on that debris and old logs and things like that that you find on the edges of like swamps and river beds and things like that. So I do my research in river bottoms, which is a real swampy kind of area, also bogs, which is also swampy. And we find them in red rot wood, which is when the tree has fallen down and it's really like soft and you can break it open really easily. And inside there, the wood is usually red. That's where it gets the name red rot.
Why is it so interesting to you to study these beetles?
Well, mostly because of the ecological niche, which I just described, and then also because these are the good guys. These are the composters. And so if we didn't have them, we would be covered in like, leaf litter, and, they take care, they compost down that leaf litter in the fall. So the ones that I find in early spring are usually in that moldy leaf litter that's been sitting there all winter. And so we need them.
And they're really good at composting?
Yes. That's their whole ecological niche.
In your research, you found the burying beetle. What should we know about this type of beetle?
So that particular group is really interesting because that is one of the few beetle groups that actually have like a nurturing they kind of raise their eggs as a family. And so there's two different subgroups of those as well. One of them I find a lot, and these are the ones that take care of like dead mice and small rodents and things like that. So what they do is they find one of these, and then this is like premium nutrition for a lot of different insects. So they have to hide it. And so what they do when they find it, they hide it. And so what they do is they take the mouse and they dehair it, and then they bury it. And then they lay their eggs on that. That's what the whole family feeds on, the male, female, and the larva. And then when the larva grows up, then it comes out of the ground and continues on with the next.
Wow, they have their whole feeding ground, literally.
Yes, it's all hidden underground.
Wow. And so this type of parental care is unusual that you haven't seen in other beetles?
That's correct. Usually they lay the eggs and then leave.
So when you talk about focusing on taxonomy and systematics, you're really concerned about classifying the diversity of life. This is your second calling, from what I understand. You had a career in sales. What prompted you to get into this?
So I had a 26-year career in, I was a district sales manager and a recruiter trainer. I have been all over the world opening stores and training staff and things like that for 3 different companies. And in 1999, my husband and I bought a house. We lived in Florida. We bought a house from an elderly woman. And so it was a typical 2-bedroom, 3-bath house. And she was living in 1 bathroom and 1 bedroom. So what we think happened is when we were cleaning out like the cobwebs and things like that in one of the rooms, a brown recluse spider got in under my pants and bit me in the side of the ankle. And it was a 2-year recovery. I almost lost my leg.
Wow.
And because of that, I couldn't do my job. I couldn't stand, I couldn't drive, I couldn't do much of anything. And so I decided that I wanted to go back to school. And at the same time, I didn't want to negate that 26 years of retail that I had. So I started down the path of pre-pharmacy. And in my first biology class, we had to dissect a locust. And I thought that was the coolest thing I ever saw. And that sent me down the path of insects.
And you haven't turned back. You're still with your insects.
Yes.
What does it feel like for you to go out into a bog or a marsh or to go into the field knowing that there are lots of different critters out there, having gone through the experience of that spider bite?
It doesn't bother me really. I figure that's like the worst of the worst could have happened. Brown recluse spiders typically don't live here in Wisconsin, and if they do, they don't have venom that's that potent. So yeah, now I know to wear nets over my face, and I usually take like duct tape and wrap up my pants legs and things so nothing can crawl up my pants anymore. But yeah, it's like you're on a mission, and the mission is to get out there and see, the beetles that are in those areas.
When you're out there, you wave your hand and you can see a wave of insects. Can you talk about just how thick the insects can get?
So remember that, I'm talking about bogs, marshes, river bottoms, things like that. And these have lots and lots and lots of mosquitoes. And there's been times, as you described, that I can go like this and see like a wave ribbon of like a break in the mosquitoes. And in order to deal with that, I do have to take prescription medication during the summer so that I can sleep at night because I get so many mosquito bites.
Wow. Ann Marsh is with us as we talk about Wisconsin's wetland insects. She is a taxonomist and systematicist and graduate student at UW-Madison studying a group of insects called
Staphylinidae.
Staphylinidae. Thank you. She's a speaker at the Wisconsin Insect Fest, which takes place in Madison on August 1st. Your talk has the word sex in it.
Yes.
We haven't gotten to that topic yet, I don't think. So what can you tell us there?
So in there, I talk about different fly species and things like that. And one of them is the bracacid. And that particular one is interesting because what it does is, in order to entice a mate, it actually makes like a little gift. So it might take like a gnat or something like that, and it wraps it up into like a little package. And so the male will stand there and until the female comes by to see what's in the package. And so while she's opening up the package, he's mating with her. But the deal is sometimes he'll trick her and just make like an empty package. And then she won't even know that until after the mating is done.
And she will not have to she won't be able to post that on social media anywhere.
No.
Okay. All right. Next word, violence. What do we got there?
I talk about the canopid fly, which is the thick-headed fly. That's also really interesting because there's two groups of those as well, and they parasitize hornets. And they do it in two different ways. One of them has an abdomen that's shaped like a can opener. And so the female will literally go up to the hornet, pry open its abdomen, and shoot an egg in there. And then, of course, the egg, when it hatches, the larva will start feeding on that hornet. And kind of like makes it into a zombie. So it kind of like lays on the forest floor. And then as it grows, it will eat that until it's completely gone. The other group of the canopid fly has like a harpoon. And so what that does is it goes up to the hornet and literally like shoots the egg into the abdomen like a harpoon.
Well, Ann, thank you so much for sharing your research. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Ann Marsh is a taxonomist and systematicist at UW-Madison studying a group of insects. They're called staphylinids, and she will present at the Wisconsin Insect Fest taking place in Madison on August 1st. Tomorrow on the show, we'll talk with a meteorologist and climatologist who's studied the weather descriptions in the Little House series and compared what Laura Ingalls Wilder wrote about extreme weather events to some of the key weather data of the 1800s. One takeaway from the book Wilder Weather is that we should share our weather stories with others and document how we felt and what happened so that future generations can have this knowledge. And it reminds me how I like to tell my kids about the Halloween blizzard of 91 every year as they get ready to trick or treat. And then my colleague Mac told me that she says her niece often asked her about what happened in the Stoughton tornado of 2005 and to retell that story. Are there weather events that you have documented and weather other stories you've passed on, share them with us. Email wisconsintoday@wpr.org. You can call or text us at 888-642-0232. That's 888-642-0232. Wisconsin Today producers include Trevor Hook, Royce Podeswa, and Mackenzie Crummy. Our technical directors are Sarah Hopeful and Tyler Ditter. Learn more about us at wpr.org/Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. You're listening to WPR News.